Hi, I'm Shaka Hislop, honorary president of Show Racism the Red Card.
Hi, I'm Marvin Bartley, player assistant manager at Livingston Football Club.
This is 25 for 25, a Show Racism the Red Card podcast. Make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube.
You bring such a unique perspective to the game, to who we are. As a player, as a coach, as an outspoken advocate for equality, your insights are simply invaluable. That being said, talk us through your most recent suspension, Marvin. What happened?
Yeah, so at the back end of last season, I picked up 13 bookings throughout the duration of the season. Obviously, the legs couldn't
bookings.
do
13 bookings, Marvin.
Shaq, you know what it's like when you come to the end, though? Your legs can't do what your mind wants to do anymore. That's why I stepped to the side now.
You always seem to be just a half a yard late. I sympathize. I do.
Exactly. So, yeah, I picked up 13 bookings. Obviously, that came with a 2-game suspension. So the start of this season, we thought that would just be as a player. Obviously, I was appointed as assistant manager also over the course of the summer. So the first game against Rangers in the league, absolutely fine. Obviously, my name was on the team sheet as assistant manager and so forth. The second game against Aberdeen, I picked up a booking again on the sidelines. So it's not too bad though, Shaka. 1 from 2 games. So
hold on. I just offered you the excuse of being half a yard short for 13 bookings. You can't claim being half a yard short as assistant manager on the sidelines. You can't.
Yeah, no, you're right. When referees make wrong decisions, it's still in me. That man's still in me. The players still live within me. The fire still burns within me. So sometimes I can't control myself, even on the side.
Fair enough. So clearly you haven't changed that much. But let me ask, how has the game itself changed in the last 12 months? 2020 was a very different year in so many regards. But specifically as per the game and fans being allowed back in stadiums, how have things changed that maybe we don't see or recognize from being this side of the wide line of the pitch? Yeah.
So for me personally, in terms of the fans being back in, there was definitely a nervousness. With how things had gone, in the summer in terms of, the England players and the stuff that they had received and, how social media had been with players being racially abused kind of when there was no fans within the stadium. So there was a nervousness from myself, most definitely, going into it. But I must say that, the fans' reaction up here has been fantastic. Outside of them bringing, a great atmosphere back to football, which is exactly what we want. In terms of the equality stuff, they've been A1. So for me, it's been a plus having them back. So it's gone from a nervousness to an excitement of having fans back in the stadium, and long may that continue.
I'm delighted to hear that. We've always done such wonderful work and been so well received up in Scotland. So on the one hand, I'm not that surprised to hear that, but on the other, I'm also absolutely delighted to hear that Scottish football fans have embraced those calls for equality in a way that so many are still struggling with. What about just the symbolism of taking the knee before games? How have fans embraced and supported that?
Yeah, so we actually played in the first game of the new season up here, which was live on the television. And I spoke about a nervousness in my last answer. And the nerve for me was that we were going to be taking the knee. Both Livingston players and coaching staff, and also Rangers players and coaching staff. And, my only real reference to players taking the knee was when their Project Restart down in England, and then obviously their fans had been back in English game before they had in the Scottish game. We all saw what happened in terms of the boos within the European Championships. So for me, my only real reference was that. And I must admit to you, when I went down and I took the knee, and it was special. I'll struggle to put into words just how special that was. And I was proud. Listen, we went on to lose the game, but for me that day was more than football. Before I was an assistant manager or a player or anything else, I'm a black man. who's been on the receiving end of racism. So to take the knee to try and end racism and try and end discrimination and fight for equality for absolutely everybody, to hear those cheers and those applause for me was special. And, I said as much after the game. I'm on social media because I think there's far too much negativity. If something negative happened, if there would have been boos, it'd have been all over the media. So when it's positive, it makes me a hypocrite. If I don't go out there and praise these people for doing what they did, then that makes me a hypocrite.
Absolutely. I totally agree. But I want to talk to you a little bit more about how you felt in taking the knee and why I want to discuss this. I spoke to Luther Blissett recently, and I credit Luther for so much of every black footballer who's gone on to earn a living in this game. Without people like Luther, I don't think either of us would have a story to tell. But Luther feels that it's lost its impact, and if it were him being asked to do that now, he could understand it for one game, but he would like to move on a lot quicker. So I appreciate Luther's perspective, given everything that he had to endure. But of course, I am no longer involved in the game at that level. At no point during my own playing career were we called on to take the knee or a show in calling for racial equality, as we've seen over the last 12 months. So what about the act? Is it the act? Was it the reception? What about it struck such a positive chord with you? And how do you counter that with Luther's perspective? And again, I add, without people like Luther Blissett, you and I may not have a story to tell as professional footballers.
Yeah, and answering first Luther's part on that, what I would say to that is, if you got somebody who's, say, of the age of 20 to watch a football match, the first football match they've ever watched in their whole life, and in one game, the players, on the referee's whistle before the game, the players took the knee, and in the other game, on the referee's whistle, the players just stood there. Which one do you think they would ask you about? Why are they doing that? To see people just standing there, and listen, I understand it. I was a great advocate of people taking a knee, and I was very strong on that. When things didn't seem to be changing and people want to try a different way, I get that. But I still think to say that taking the knee doesn't have, a reaction, people don't see it and think, why are they doing it, or know the reasons we are doing it and they agree with it. I think it's extremely wrong, because now you see some games start and players are just standing there at the start. The referee might as well blow the whistle and the game kicks off. They're not holding a banner. There's nothing to let you know that these people are fighting for equality and to try and end racism. They're just standing there.
So what's next?
So,
what is next after we take it? I've said in the past, I fully support taking the knee before games and allowing teammates, fans to show their support for this call for racial equality. But ultimately we'll be judged by what we do when we stand up. How we take those shows of action, how we take that call for equality and make it a part of who we are. How do we take it into our communities? What's next?
Yeah, what is next? So taking a knee was never going to be to end racism. It was to start conversations, and it's done that. And we're still taking a knee now because not a lot that's been done. But the powers that be, we need them next. Football cannot change society. It's impossible. Yes, we have a massive impact. Yes, we're watched worldwide. But we need the powers that be. We need the governments. We need the FAs to come in and they're next. We need them to do the next part. Listen, if football could end this, and if football could change this, then we would. Because we've taken the bull by the horns, and we've been the first ones to react to it and take the need to say, no, enough is enough. But when you've got people within power in the government, when the knee's being booed and they're not condoning it until after the tournament, when they realise, that people are being racially abused and the whole country's got behind them, the whole football world's got behind them. For them, it's about being popular, isn't it? That's all they care about. So, they've seen us take the knee, they've seen us try to make our changes, but we're limited. We have a ceiling to what we can do. But what we shouldn't do, if we're the first tier of a wedding cake and we say, do you know what, because the second and third tier is not being put on, let's just take it away. How can we expect change? How can we expect change? It won't happen. So what is next is for the government to do their bit and for the FAs to also do their bit, because we need their help.
You talk about post-tournament. I just looking back at the Euros and what was said by Boris Johnson, by Priti Patel at the start of the tournament with fans booing players taking the knee. And as much as I know Scotland is home for you now, and I understand that that relationship, let's just leave it at that between the Scottish and the English. What did you make of the fans' reaction, the England fans' reactions after the final against Italy, and how they treated Bukayo Saka, Jadon Sancho, Marcus Rashford, how they responded to the Italian fans in the stats?
It was a disgrace. You want to use stronger words, but just to tell you, it was an absolute disgrace. To be treated like that for players who have gone out there and represented their country, who've worked. Yes, some have had short careers, and others. Saka's obviously a young man, but for everything he's put into football, and to go out there and I was watching a game when those players missed a penalty, I knew what was going to happen. And I said to him, he was a white guy and he was sitting there. I said, you know what's going to happen now, don't you? And he said to me, what do you mean? And I was like, look who missed the penalties. And even at that point, he wasn't looking at the colour of the players, and he was like, well, they all play for different teams. I said, they're all black. I said, watch what happens on social media. And he actually checks his phone. He checked his phone maybe 5 minutes after the final penalty. And then he just looked at me and he looked at his phone and shook his head. He didn't have to say anything. Yeah. Didn't have to say a single word to me, because I knew. And how these individuals can think it's acceptable to, say these things and post these things to individuals who have, as I said, who are at the top of their game, who've worked extremely hard to get there, who should we all be proud of them. It's absolutely horrendous. But as I said, it doesn't surprise me. I spoke to, someone going into the England squad before the tournament, and the last thing their parents said to them is, I'm really worried should you make a mistake. Imagine being a parent. You should be proud of your child for going and representing their country, the top level in a huge international tournament. And to turn around to your child and say to them, I'm worried in case you make a mistake, because you know what the backlash could be. For me, it says a lot, and then it's quite damning.
It does. Both those stories, post Euros, and how as parents of black footballers are concerned, just speaks volumes to where we are, how much work there is still to be done. But at the same time, I think the fans' reactions, the general fans' reactions that you saw afterwards at the Marcus Rashford mural, how Bukayo Saka was welcomed back into Arsenal, it showed that people are prepared to step up and do be the best of represent the best of who we are and what this moment calls for. So it highlighted the issues, the challenges, and it forced so many into action in response. Even in responding to that, recently you saw a group of Rangers fans racially abusing. It came out on video. Kyogo Furuhashi, the Japanese Celtic player, and why it struck me as both surprising and disappointing in equal measure is because of how good Rangers have been as a club in supporting anti-racism movements, in supporting taking the knee, in supporting our own organization. And then to see Rangers fans, this is racist abuse. There's no other way to put it. What was your take on that, and how best can we make the point that this is a racist act, and while a lot of the focus has been around black people and people of African descent, this call for equality transcends transcends race?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I wouldn't call them Rangers fans. I call them followers of Rangers. I don't believe a true supporter of a football club where you have different ethnic minorities within your club would say and act in this way. But when we've been taking the knee, for me personally, it's not just been about black people. It's been about racism. You know, I know we have a lot of Asian people in places like Glasgow and other parts of Scotland. And I know at Sunday League level, they don't have a voice. You know, if somebody was to be racially abused at a Sunday League match, you know, regardless of your colour or your religion or whatever it's to do with, you know, you don't really have a voice if you try and go on social media or something like that. So this is why I felt it was so important for me to try and be at the forefront of things. I do have a voice. So you could contact me and say, you know, I'm racially abused, and I don't care what colour you are. You know, Kyogo was racially abused by these followers of Rangers. And again, you know, I didn't sit on my hands. I was trying to be at the front of trying to sort this out and try and help with this. You know, your colour or your religion or your sexuality doesn't matter. It's discrimination. You know, I want to end discrimination. When I take the knee, it's not for black people. It's for everybody to be treated equally. You know, and that's why I do it. And as you said, you know, a lot of it has been around black players, because in a professional game, it's been black players who've been getting racially abused. You know, now we have an Asian player getting racially abused. I stand with him as well, just as much as I stand with anybody else, whether you are, you know, abused about your sexuality or your religion or anything else. You know, my support doesn't waver dependent on, you know, I've been discriminated. I'm against all forms of discrimination, and that's a very, very important message that people must understand. As I said, you know, sometimes I have to use my voice for other people who don't have a voice, and as I said, I'm willing to do that.
I said it surprised and disappointed me from the Rangers fans, especially given how football rallied around Glenn Kamara earlier this year, and the impact that had. While a section of those fans surprised and disappointed me, it didn't surprise or disappoint me Rangers' own response, which has been forthright and condemning. What do you make of Rangers, of the example that Glasgow Rangers set?
It's been absolutely fantastic. A very, very short investigation and then a very stern punishment. For me, that's all football can do. That's all Rangers Football Club can do. They ban them and then they ban the supporters club. Now, they've set the precedent for everybody else. You know, whether it be something about racism or we have a problem up here with sectarianism, you know, they have to be treated the same, hand in hand. You know, let's address the elephant in the room. There's no longer a time or a place for us to hide away from things. You know, we have to be setting an example, because if we want to change future generations, then we're going to have to get stern and harsh with the people who are doing these things now. We can't afford to let them continue. You know, what Rangers did, as I said, was absolutely fantastic. And you know, everyone has to applaud the club for the way they went about it. We've seen supporters of other clubs do other things. We've seen stuff down in England, you know, Billy Gilmore and the songs that we chanted about him. I've not seen a fan ban yet, or the club launch an investigation and come out with something within 24 hours. You know, Rangers have led the way with this, and I think that's important, not just for Scottish football, but for football on a whole. You know, these things cannot be accepted. They cannot be accepted.
Absolutely. I think it really is an incredible example set by the club. You already touched on this. What can what can all footballers do to show support for Furuhashi?
I think there's been an awful lot of players who sent support to him directly. I think when people come in contact with him, they need to let him know, because don't forget, as great as he is at football, this young man's came from a different country. You know, I don't know how great his English is, but Scotland isn't, for me, isn't a racist country. I've been welcomed with open arms up here. Yes, I've had a couple of incidents, but more down in England. You know, so he needs to know that these mindless individuals, you know, that isn't Scotland. That's not how Scotland is, because his family back in Japan or wherever they might be, they'll be worried about him. Yeah. You know, a mother doesn't want to see her child racially abused. A father, you know, a cousin, anybody who's related to him. You know, because as I said, I've had it. So he would have his family that'd be extremely worried about him, and he probably had a sense of worry when he saw it. Been in the country for no longer than 3-4 weeks, and yet he's been racially abused. You know, it's absolutely horrendous. And us as players, we have to rally around him, and so do football, and you know, the wider society as well. Whoever you support, you don't want to see people racially abused, so we have to show support for him.
Marvin, as you know, Show Racism the Red Card is an educational anti-racism charity. Is what you saw from that section of people who followed Rangers, I think is the term you use as opposed to Rangers fans. Is this about education? Is this about teaching people the difference between banter and racist abuse, showing how thin that line is between having a laugh and instigating something far more sinister.
I think the educational route for when talking about grown men, fully grown men, they know better. They know better that, if they were to walk into an office or to walk into somewhere and see someone who worked for the police, for example, they wouldn't crack these same jokes. So for me, it's not an educational thing. If you would say something regardless of who you're around and it's wrong, then it's an educational thing. But they know right from wrong. And for far too long, people have thought, to poke fun at the way somebody looks or their religion or the colour of their skin, trying to put people off and seeing it as banter. I think that went a long, long time ago. As I said, we have to be very careful when we talk about educating people. Yes, educate. Some younger people might not understand about this, but these are, people in their late 30s, 40s. For me, they knew right from wrong. And yes, you can be educated at all ages, but there's no way they'd have gone into their workplace and had these same jokes. They felt that they were safe. They felt they were on a minibus and they're allowed to do it because 3, 4, 5 other people are doing it. They felt they were strengthening numbers. No way would that individual walk down the streets of Glasgow doing what they did on that bus. And for me, that means it's not an educational thing. It's an ignorance.
Marvin, thank you very much for joining me once again. I always enjoy these conversations we have. You embody so much of why I continue to believe that the game and its players are the perfect vehicle for anti-racism and equality message that Show Racism the Red Card uses as its foundations. You've supported us from day one. You continue to live it. Now, if we could just get you to stop getting booked, it'll be so much better for everybody. I can't keep making excuses for you, Marvin. I can't.
I need these boys to get us 3 points so I can keep my job. So you might have to dust those goalie gloves off and fly over to Scotland. We might need your experience.
On a serious note, thank you very much for your time once again. Thank you very much for everything that you have been and continue to be.
No problem at all, honestly. Thank you for having me. And as I said, we'll keep fighting and we'll get there in the end.